2 kids, at the dinner table, wife to take care of, bills to pay, really needed to be making more money than a part-time position provided for. So unfortunately, in kind of an abrupt manner, I took up a full-time position in Hudson, New Hampshire. And never in my life did I think that I would be working in New Hampshire, and never mind being a planner in New Hampshire. And the people of Hudson, the Board of Selectmen, some of them were upset because, they never thought that I'd stick around. Well, I said the last job I had, I was there for 17 years as the planning director in Woburn. And I might as well just tell you, I ran for mayor down there. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. So my career started in '85 as the town planner, or the city planner in Woburn. And there's not much vertical movement in one's career when you're the planner and there's no community development position. Woburn's kind of a small city, 36,000 people, a lot of economic development activity. It's right along 128, but there's no vertical movement. So what does one do when one's trying to climb the ladder? You run for the next position. And this was in 1993, and I was a real young buck at the time. And the incumbent mayor, Jack Rabbit, who was my mentor at the time, I worked for him for 13 years. Well, he decided to not run. Well, 8 of us within 2 weeks were in the race. Well, that was in May. In August, Jack Rabbit, the mayor of Woburn, pulled the quick one. He got back in the race. And he won, hands down. And that was the end of that story, and I continued working. 2 years goes by, and this time he quits. He's not running again. And there were probably 8 of us in the race. I ended up winning the primary and lost the final by 150 votes out of 15,000. Well, the deal was that I'd still maintain my job, and the new mayor would be the new mayor. And then in '01, the same thing happened. I ran, won the primary, didn't win the final. I'm out of a job the next day, and I'm looking for a job. Everything's coming about. I built a house up in New Hampshire, up by Ragged Mountain, and in the meantime, I'm looking for a position. And I was fortunate enough that Georgetown did hire me that summer, and I became the part-time planner also for Tewksbury. So I was doing both positions at that time before a full-time position came about. And I was in Hudson, New Hampshire from 2002, late 2002, up until last February. And again, very fortunate that the position, for a mixture of reasons, opened up in Georgetown. And it was after Georgetown hired a new planner, and that didn't really work out for that person in the planning board. And they called me up and asked me if I was still interested, and I told them I was. And I showed up for work on February 14th of 2017. And it's really, really busy trying to pull together a lot of loose ends for a community such as Georgetown that has a lot going on. A lot going on insofar as zoning matters. There's a lot of interest in Georgetown for economic development. And we have an economic development committee. We meet once a month. I don't know if anybody here has been paying attention to the National Ave property that the town acquired through tax title last spring. It's a 26-acre parcel of land, and it's on the easterly side of 95, on the northbound side. It has its own history of multiple owners over the years, and just recently, the most recent owner was not able to keep up with the property taxes, and the town acquired the property outright. And it's a 26-acre parcel. It has some environmental challenges. I bring this up because it's very significant, and it leads into how much economic development interest there is in this community right now. So you have a parcel that's bisected, 26 acres. It's on National Ave, directly abutting the highway on the other side of National Ave. And it's bisected by a major wetland. So there's 4 to 5 acres of developable land to the south of this parcel. And there's up to 14 to 15 acres of upland on the north side. Now, everybody, when this first happened, was so excited, but there's a problem. No access. There's a developer that owns 2 small parcels in between National Ave and the 26-acre parcel that the town owns. And how do we get from point A, National Ave, onto our property, the town-owned property, so that we can plan for development of that property? Well, when a property is landlocked, unless the property owner that owns the land between your property and the right-of-way agrees to the terms of access or agrees to the terms of sale, you have pretty much an undeveloped parcel of land with no potential for development. So we're like, well, we gotta figure out some way. Lo and behold, I get a call from an attorney one afternoon in my office. Calls me up and says, I represent the property owner, and we're in land court regarding a multiple amount of parcels that my client owns. And 2 of those parcels happen to be the parcels that prohibit access to the property the town now owns. I said, well, that's good. That's good. One thing led to another. The planning board, one meeting ago, approved the plan that was dictated by the land court judge, Judge Piper, that tied the development potential of those 2 parcels that blocked the access. But the judge demanded, and it was inscribed on the plan that the planning board just approved, that those 2 parcels can only be developed in conjunction with the development, the future development of the town-owned parcel. Now, we're gonna have to wait for the court case to take place, and that's going to be late in the spring, early in the summer, probably resulting in a court decision in late summer, early fall. Yeah.
How about eminent domain? Does that come into effect at all?
Eminent domain, you can impose as a municipality, state, federal. However, by imposing eminent domain, you can only utilize that property that you take for a public purpose, which is tricky. Yeah, so much of, and I've been doing this again since 1985 and in 2 states, and what I've observed, there are very, very few people that really know land law. It's incredibly tricky. It changes from year to year. States are different. You have the U.S. Constitution that protects property rights, but then you have a multitude of land law at the state level, right? You have land court cases at the state level, judges making decisions on land matters. You really would have to be a rocket scientist, computer scientist, and everything else to have all of this law locked down in your mind, and all these court cases locked down if you were practicing in multiple states. So within any state, you probably have 100 lawyers that really know the law. They interpret the law. They provide guidance to legislative bodies, politicians on what's constitutional, what's not constitutional. Advising them on what they need to do to tweak the law so that it can stand up to the overall intention of our forefathers, and that was to protect property rights. But again, if anybody has any questions pertaining to their land or their brother's land, their wife, or whatever, please raise your hand. I'll do my best to answer any of those questions. or give you the standard price, I would seek legal advice. But, you know, you have to talk to a land lawyer. You know, if you have a brother-in-law, sister-in-law practicing law, and they specialize in divorce or estate planning, that may not be the person that you really want to talk to when it comes to land law, because this stuff is very particular, and it takes a lot of concentration of knowledge and experience to really interpret it, and so that you, the individual, aren't spending money needlessly, or you know, you're not getting to what you want done by that lawyer when you're dealing with local government officials and local boards and commissions. You really got to know your stuff, or you're walking into a room with no lights on and no hope of finding your way out. So you do have to you know, hire the right people, and we all know the old saying, you get what you pay for. Other than that, I'll go back into, I'll give you, for instance, of, you know, what a typical week starts out with as a town planner in Georgetown. You know, we had that storm last week. We knew it was coming, and Thursday town hall was going to be closed because of the storm. I had to get a packet out before Thursday, and typically I'm working into the evening hours getting that packet out for the following Wednesday meeting, and Thursday being the last day of the week in Georgetown Town Hall. Well, I had Wednesday to do it. Well, I had to put it on everything on speed dial and pedal to the metal, and luckily, working hand in hand with my assistant, we got the packets out Wednesday before we went home that evening, and I didn't have to worry about, you know, the planning board coming in to Wednesday night's meeting, which was last night, coming into Wednesday night's meeting with no packet. You got to do what you got to do. If I had to stay there till midnight Wednesday to get that packet done, I would have done that. I was just fortunate enough that I was able to get things done. People weren't interrupting me, and for whatever reason that day, and I got the packet out with my assistant. And I was truly happy. I knew that, hey, the storm's coming, and what did we all do the next 2 days? You know, plow snow, snow blow, shovel snow, and you know, that's New England winter. You never know when it's going to come, and you know how bad it's going to be. And that was a pretty good storm. So anyway, Monday morning, I go into the office, and there's a slew of emails. One of the items on our agenda last night was to talk about an Economic Development Committee joint meeting that we were going to have, the planning board was going to have with the Economic Development Committee, and that was going to take place next Tuesday night. So I'm putting a lot of work into that, and explaining to the board, you know, we got to meet with them, and they want to meet with us, and here are ideas. Well, Monday morning, I got an email from one of the planning board members, hey, under state law, that may end up causing a conflict of interest for our planning board. And there were valid points brought up. And one of the points is that, you know, a planning board, an elected planning board, or an appointed planning board, when they receive a plan and they're hearing that plan, they are supposed to the extent possible, be completely objective, neutral. They don't have a position. They're like jurors. You know, you can't be on the jury if you're biased and you have a subjective opinion of something. You have to be objective. So that planning board members' concerns were absolutely valid. I ran them by the town administrator. A couple of days later, he got back to me, and lo and behold, guess what? We're in emergency mode. This was happening yesterday morning. It took a couple of days for this email to settle in and get back to, after I was doing a lot of other things. Get back, and I said, hey guys, guess what, Economic Development Committee, we can't have that joint meeting we'd all love to have because of this. And I explained, you know, the neutrality and the objectivity, and we just can't get into becoming biased over future development that may take place on these parcels of land that we'll be discussing. So nixed all of that, changed the agenda for the Economic Development Committee that's going to take place next Tuesday night, and we're going to meet by ourselves with invited guests. But the planning board has to remain neutral and out of the picture, of review. That was one of the items. And then we're dealing with a 3-lot subdivision on a 125-acre parcel of land out in Tenney Street. And the zoning map says it's residential zoned, the entire parcel. And a couple of historians of the planning board said, you know, I don't recall that property being entirely residential. In fact, I think the property, this is opinions I'm getting from 2 planning board members, I think the property is zoned industrial and residential, but the residential is in the backland. Well, 2 days of scrambling around, doing research, working with the town assessor, Tom Berube, and a couple of board members sending me emails, you know, referencing the zoning ordinance, and lo and behold, indisputable evidence that this land that the owner thought, and I thought, was residential zoned, wasn't residential zone. It was industrial zone for 400, 500 feet off of Tenney Street, in accordance with laws that were passed, zoning district that was passed, dating back to the 70s and living up to today, that the property owner was unaware of. What happened was, once I presented that evidence to them, and you know, we had town council initially reviewing the plan too, but he was unaware of the industrial zoning. This came through the continuity of knowledge and experience of 2 board members that have been around. Otherwise, this land would have been erroneously subdivided into residential lots when you can't do that in an industrial zone. So yesterday, 4:30, negotiating all this, I got the letter that I needed for the board to allow withdrawal of that plan, and that's what the applicant wanted. They were not interested in subdividing their property for industrial purposes. They just wanted to subdivide their property for residential purposes. And I don't know who they were planning to convey the lots to, whether it was family members or not. They would need to have those proposed lots residentially zoned. Does anybody know what's involved with that? Well, to rezone property, yeah, well, before that, you have to have a planning board meeting requested by the Board of Selectmen. Planning board holds its public hearing, the butters are notified, everybody's notified, we have the hearing. A lot of times, these rezonings are favorably reviewed and recommended to the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen receive it, put it on the town warrant, it goes to town meeting, and then the town has to vote on it too. So it's not a simple matter of you know, raising your hand and say, hey, I own the property, I want it zoned this way. That's all well and good, but guess what? You have X number of steps that have to be involved too. Another major issue that we were dealing with last night, the DPW superintendent wants a number of roadways in town looked at for potential acceptance as public ways. And that's easier said than done. Much easier said than done, because the way it works legally, the petitioner, in this case, say be the road inspector, the superintendent, has to request the Board of Selectmen to take up the subject matter of looking at wanting to accept these particular streets as public ways. So their first order of business is to send it to the planning board. And the planning board reviews that subject on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. They have to do a lot of due diligence to figure out what the status is of each of the roadways. Are they modern roadways that only need as-built plans approved for? Or are they old roadways of which whoever developed the road centuries ago obviously is no longer with us? And what do we do with these gravel roadways that have houses on them that are considered private only because they did not meet the modern criteria of public acceptance? And in Georgetown, being a very old town, has a lot of old roadways that are considered private, but the town maintains them, plowing wise, and, you know, some degree of maintenance, but, you know, it's always financial limitation involving the municipality to really build these roadways to modern standards. Most of your roadways are all built and not maintained, but all built by a private developer, as subdivision control requires before they can build on the house lots that they're developing. But again, because Georgetown and this part of the country is so old, you know, it's centuries old, you have houses dating back to the 1700s that the roadways are the same as when they first built, and no improvements have been made. Yet, you know, we have to deal with these particular roadways and trying to determine whether they're going to become public ways or remain private ways. Remain ways that are maintained by the town but not officially accepted. And this gets into another slew of things, because every mile of roadway that's a public way, that gives you more money, Chapter 90 money from the state, that helps towns maintain roadways throughout the Commonwealth. I could go on and on. If anybody has any questions, just keep on interjecting. Oh, so last night we were dealing with this marijuana issue, cannabis, whatever you want to call it. You know, it depends on what generation you're from, what you think of this stuff and whatever. But you know, in the Commonwealth, you know, at the legislative level, at the governor's level, they're trying to come up with this set of guidelines in accordance with what the people of this state have approved regarding the subject. And in this particular case, last night, we were like, hey, when are we going to move forward with an ordinance that's going to be provided for the townspeople to vote on in the spring? And the best we could do at last night's meeting was to say, we have to have this subject discussed rather soon with the Board of Selectmen, Town Council, and get this issue ready in the form of a town warrant, which is an ordinance that will be up for a vote of the people at town meeting. And you know, just to be specific about it, it's to decide whether or not the town of Georgetown is going to allow for the sale of recreational marijuana.
Do you know what the projected revenue would be from having, I'm against that anyway, I don't care what anybody says, I'm against that, but, do you know what the projected revenue from, I mean, that's why a lot of towns want it, because they're gonna make a lot of revenue out of it.
That,
Doesn't make it right, but.
right, and that's the case. You know, for a town like Georgetown, that is striving for economic development relative to producing additional, much needed additional revenue. You know, Healthy Farm, not that I was here during the permitting process, but in my opinion, the town was very sophisticated in the fact that it recognized this industry, this medical marijuana, Healthy Farms, and they negotiated a very good deal relative to revenue production from medical marijuana in that grow facility.
Medical.
Yes, and you know, that should, for a very long period of time, produce a substantial amount of revenue. I don't want to name specific amounts, but it's very substantial for a town such as
How's the police
Georgetown.
department feel about this?
I'd rather not talk for the police department.
I think I know the answer.
Yeah, and he has made it known, and I think if I was in his field, I would feel the same way. I mean, but you know, this world's crazy. It's getting crazier by the day.
You don't have to tell us.
Yeah, and you know, the world is always, a wise world is always seeking input from wise people.
Yes.
You know, and then you start talking about you know, ancient cultures, and you know, who were the people that advised societies on what they should be doing, you know, planting the crops in the spring. You know, a full moon in the fall time means this and that. It was the people that had years of experience. It was the community elders. It was the tribe elders. And, you know, that's not happening. And in this world, I don't want to get off on a total tangent, but who the heck's in charge? It's like a council of elders and wise people that they're not being listened to, no one's paying attention to them. They have this incredible, you guys at the table, you get years and years of experience. You know, I would not want to be who I am today, doing what I'm doing back at the beginning of my career. I can't, when I look back, I didn't have any experience in really what I was doing. It was all, you know, doing it at the moment, learning in the moment. But now, 30 some odd years later, I feel so much way more comfortable talking what I'm talking about in planning and development, economic development, than I did back then. I didn't even know what I was talking about back then. Now, through years of experience, I do know what I'm talking about, I think. At least I think, but I still seek counsel. You know, and we all try to seek counsel. You know, when we have significant others, you know, I don't make a move. Hey, is it all right? You know, and you know, I just bought a dog for our dog, a little puppy. You know, I wouldn't have brought that home without, you know, my wife knowing about it. She was with me. She supported that. So, yes.
Monday selectmen meeting, Senator Tarr was there and told us that the state has earmarked some money for Georgetown for economic development purposes, but he wasn't specific about it.
Yeah.
Do you know yet, and can you be more specific about what it's for?
At last night's planning board meeting, I didn't hear yet that that was a publicly announced grant, earmarked grant that the town received. So the town received, through the efforts of Senator Tarr, a $50,000 grant for promoting economic development activity. So whatever we need, that particular money, we need the money for economic development planning. So
And that's not a match grant or anything? That's
no, that was an earmark.
Right.
Yeah. You know, that earmark legislation's coming back in vogue. I mean, it's being talked about at the national level. It's being acted on at the state level. And that legislation was initially vetoed by the governor,
yes,
and overridden by our good fellow representatives in the State House, looking after our particular interest at the local level.
Yeah.
Let me stand up for a minute.
Yeah.
I usually don't do this. I do ask a lot of questions here. But I want to tell you one thing. When I first started in this, selectman, I'm on my 4th term and I'm not up for re-election, so I feel a little comfortable doing this. But one of my mentors was Jack Lahamadou. And Jack told me once that this position, the town planner, was nothing but a seat warmer. I have learned to completely disagree with that. I mean, I think that this position is one of the most important in town, to take this town to the next steps that we need. And economic development also is a big thing, and I just hope the town takes the right steps. And this is a good town planner. So thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Hey, just to get back to National Ave and that whole area, another thing, I'm the town's commissioner for Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, and we are on a very short list, and to a point where we're in all likelihood going to be designating 96 acres in and around 95 at the exit 54, including the National Ave property, as a priority development area. It's already designated from a few years ago a priority development site, but there's new terminology and there's a lot more work being provided at the local level from the state government, Mass Works and Mass Development. Matter of fact, at the end of this month, we're going to be taking, Merrimack Valley Economic Development Committee, we're going to be taking a tour of all of the 6 remaining priority development areas, and one of them being that exit off of 54. So there's a lot of focus at the state level to help Georgetown provide for a more expanded, more active economic future in that, off of that interchange. Yes.
Question, you keep on saying economic development. Who are we trying to impress, and what type of companies are you thinking inviting?
You know, other than taking a real serious, up-to-date look at the interchange and taking into consideration what today's market may come up with for future development off of that interchange, you know, realistically, it's probably considered one of the most underdeveloped full access interchanges, and that's on both sides, the north and south side. You know, it needs physical upgrading, the condition of the roadways leading to and from the highway. So to upgrade the physical aspects of the roadways, the on and off ramps, would be a major step in the right direction. And hopefully that is one of the results of this economic development attention. And then recently, the town administrator, Mike Farrell, and myself, we met the deadline for a technical assistance grant pertaining to that National Lab site. And we just got word last week that we're going to end up getting that grant also. And that's going to help us further plan for that 26-acre parcel.
Are we talking like malls or
No.
things of that nature?
No, you know what, you know, in the planning field today and throughout the country, you have the mixed use stuff going on where you have residential, you have commercial, you have office space. You know, it's its own self-sustaining environment.
Linfield, would they have
Yeah.
Linfield?
Yeah, I couldn't envision anything on that scale retail-wise. But I could envision, as a planner, for both sides of the interchange, having, you know, a more mixed-use environment. You know, you have it's happening everywhere, but you have residential, you've got commercial, you have, you know, these, they look like town centers, you know, that it's all part of one big development. The constraint for development in that interchange, as in the constraint for all development in Georgetown, is the lack of sewer treatment. So right now,
That'll never happen.
but you know, they have the 40B project, mirrors 40B project off of 95 Cheney Street. That has its own sewer treatment facility. They're technologically, there really isn't anything that can't be overcome to a certain extent. You know, there's just a certain amount of septic capacity that could be built within this 96 acre. I say 96, really could be 120, 130 acres, whatever. But, you know, the possibility is there if the town wants it. Again, everything in this town government derives from a vote at either the spring town meeting or the fall town meeting. And how many times over the years, for many of the people here that have lived in Georgetown over the years, many years, have not gone along with Georgetown introducing storage, or Georgetown not going along with rezoning. Most recently, a major part of the legislative background in town, in 2009, it was a 43R proposal for downtown, and that failed. The margin of victory and loss was narrow, but it didn't pass. And you know, that there was a lot of work put into that. Problem when something doesn't pass, it's usually marketing. You know, the word wasn't sufficiently put out there. You know, people were not convinced. You know, you need a majority to do anything. And you know, to go through so much planning for a proposal like that, and see it fall flat in its face at Springtown meeting or Fall Town meeting, it's like a punch in the gut for planners and people that support it, and usually derails that whole movement, either for a year, 2 years, or here it's been since 2000, I believe it was 2009, and it's 2018 now. You know, going on almost a full decade, and that ball is still dropped back there. And that ball could have really helped out the downtown area be much more than it presently is. I mean, it's a very attractive downtown, but there's still a lot of problems that need to be overcome. And one of those problems is the introduction of some type of enhanced sewer capacity.
The sewer capacity, it's the big thing with, you know, also parking and things of that nature, the parking area, and it's not much the parking.
And traffic.
You know, and the traffic, and that's another thing that,
Water supply, I mean, there's restrictions from May until October. And I mean, I can understand for once, you know, if it's green and mow or cut it, I don't care what comes up, but you can't wash your cars except between 6 in the morning and 9. You can't water, at least with a sprinkler. I mean, it's just, you know, I mean, it seems like we're limited by what we can get out of the ground, or that the state will approve from the Harper River watershed.
That's an issue that's always being worked on, and just recently, this past spring, and there was money being bet against me when it came before the planning board that it would never get it done. And it's not me, but the planning board was convinced through the due diligence of everybody involved. But the water tower was approved in one planning board meeting off of Long Hill Road. And they're actually breaking ground on that this winter. I mean, that is going to be done. That's going to be a major enhancement for water pressure and capacity throughout town, but especially in that area.
Yeah.
On the easterly side of town. And the town was fortunate enough recently to hire a new manager for the Georgetown Water Department, and very experienced gentleman. He may be another speaker in the future, Jim Leveka. Yeah. Yeah, well, in Woburn we call him Leveka, that Leveka clan, because Jim and his whole family are from North Woburn. And he worked for Pennachuck Waterworks over in Nashua, which is a big water company. I think it's the biggest in New Hampshire. And you know, he does come with a lot of experience, and he's very involved and hands-on. And a number of times I've met with him. You know, there's a lot of work to do. But in every town, there's a lot of work to do for water. You know, the whole idea is to stay busy, stay diligent, and do what you're supposed to. Do your job, as Belichick would say. Do your job. You know, don't be doing something else when you're getting paid to do your job. You know?
What's going on up at Pembroke? Yeah,
Pembroke.
the school. They got the bulldozers up in the woods.
That I didn't think anybody would ask that question. And I wanted to tell that story, but I just couldn't come out with that. You'd be like, what? Off of Elm Street. This is really,
No kidding.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story, and I'll try to keep it short. I'm sitting in my office one day, and all of a sudden, complaints are starting. You know, Mike Farrell's getting calls, the school department's getting calls, everybody's getting calls. What the heck is going on? There's an excavator being unloaded on the emergency access for the Pembroke School. What's that all about? Nobody knew. No, literally
kidding.
nobody knew. Somebody opened the gate for them, but nobody knew what was going on. Well, early last spring, developers were talking about putting a senior complex, a 10-unit senior complex, on the two parcels off of that emergency access road.
Yeah.
Okay, but they went away, met with them once, and next thing I know, they're out there with the excavator, and nobody knew about it. Well, the Board of Health knew about it because somebody
I
had to
knew
give them-
about it.
Yeah, they were doing the test pitting,
Yeah.
and that's what the whole thing was. Well, how could they be doing that? You know, that doesn't make any sense because that's just an emergency access. It's nothing other than emergency access. That's what everybody in town is told, including the people that abut that right of way, right? On Elm Street.
Yeah.
And they were most, you wanna?
I live on Elm Street.
Okay. So I did some research, working with the assessing department, Tom again, and a couple other people, and guess, lo and behold, that emergency access way is actually one of those old roadways that I was talking about earlier. And it is called Old Cart Path Road.
Yeah, it is.
Old Cart Path Road. Well, how did Old Cart Path Road, which has private properties along it, fronting along it, end up being erased off the map? And nobody knew anything about it. When, as early as 1972,
The name is Fred True.
the
Right.
That's right.
Worst thing that ever happened to Georgetown.
Well, and this is a great one too, because that street was most recently approved in 1972 for a lot line change, and it's clear in 1972 in a recorded plan, Old Cart Path Road, that, you know, in history gets erased pretty well, except land. Land, if you go back and do the title research and you know what you're doing at the Registry of Deeds, you can go all the way back to when King George was granting the land to, you know, our founders, you know, big estates and whatnot, whether it was the Pengrees or the, you know, the other old names in this area, this region. This region is one of the oldest in the country, without question. So anyway, you have that Old Cart Path Road exists. It was overlooked, in whoever was in charge of the research of that emergency access way, for some reason didn't see that it had a much longer established history and was actually a roadway that should have been picked up, but it wasn't. And everybody was pretty much sold a bill of goods. I'm being completely honest, you know, and not that I was here, but at the time and putting all the pieces together, everybody was told it was an emergency accident. That's all it would ever be, and you don't have to worry about anybody developing off of it until today. And you know, I guess through the results of the perk test, the land, because the groundwater is so close to the surface and it's rocky, what I've been told to this day that, or up to date, that it could sustain 2 dwelling units, one in either lot, on either side of the road, and that's the development potential of that property. Now, whether or not those houses are actually built upon remains to be seen. You know, again, it may be an
How
amendment.
big?
Just houses.
Just houses.
Yeah, if one of the planning board members has their way, it'll be a small house. Small house.
Better be.
And then there are other people on the board that don't mind what size house, but, you know, there was another big discussion
Makes you
last
wonder
night.
how we built a school in there.
I know. Especially with, Jesus Christ.
On West Street,
Yeah.
Gary, you might be able to,
That was approved for, I think, a 55 and older.
yeah.
And I think those things kind of, the market value of them kind
Well,
of
the
fade.
land is
So
so
what,
polluted, right?
what, you know, the next step, I don't think anybody has really come forward to do anything
It's still
else.
privately owned, the land.
I believe it is, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe
It,
What, where
You
the
know what,
junkyard was?
yeah, it's been,
Jesus Christ.
It was, what do you call that? Because it was a junkyard,
it's a
Environmental.
brownfield.
brownfield.
Yeah.
But it all got cleaned up and everything.
Right, it's been remediated, and it does have a future. You know, brownfields are opportunities for, you know, development. You know, I come from one of the biggest brownfields, you know, in the country, in Woburn, in that northeast part of the community, and you know, it's absolutely thriving. And you know, it was chromium, lead, arsenic, you name it.
There's arsenic
You know,
everywhere.
that parking lot is just, it's an alternative cover. You know, it's all controlled underneath. Luckily, people don't realize that it has a very thick layer of clay. And the migration of those chemicals, which were involved with the chemical plant that dates back to the 1850s in Woburn along the Aberjona River, those weren't the pollutants that were polluting the Aberjona River. It was a modern day industry. And if you saw the movie Civil Action, it was solvents being dumped by the barrelful in back of one of the modern companies located in East Woburn. And those solvents migrating and creating this pollution of plume into the water wells.
Yeah.
Kind of like the fly ash in Lemon Lake.
Yeah. I mean, I could spend more than an entire day, because I was the planner when all of that was taking place and all the planning that went into it. And that dates back to, the Reagan era and, Reagan's successor.
They'll never build on that property.
So, futures can become bright resulting from brownfields, and it's happening everywhere. Melrose is going through the same thing at a much smaller scale, but they have a lot of upscale multifamily housing being developed, and they're right on the commuter rail corridor. And
Melrose City,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
that's what Georgetown's gonna turn into if we keep going.
You can develop, but if you overdevelop, you lose the quality of a town.
Right.
But see, this is the beauty of a town like this, is that it's ruled by the people. It's the closest form of true democracy that you can have. You can, by participating and making sure that you go to town meeting, you really can help to create Georgetown's future and whatever you want it to be. And I say to people, when I talk to them, and I talk to a lot of people, who wouldn't want to live in the town of Georgetown?
Nice.
It's very nice. It's very nice. And, it's in this whole enclave of communities that surround us. It's probably one of the finest areas of the country. Shh.
But that's where we have to be careful, because you did say something earlier. When something fails, as you said many times, it's a result of marketing. And so you have to be careful, because something fails because people don't want it. But yet they keep coming back at you 2-3 times. You can say it's better marketing, but it's just, sometimes the pressure is there. I
Yeah.
mean, we need to respect each other's decisions also. And that's-
Absolutely. And, somebody in my position, I'm just doing my job. I have Board of Selectmen members that have their agendas, and their individual agendas, and planning board members that all have their own opinions. And, no one's the king. No one makes a decision on their own that formulates the future for the community. And truly, the community of Georgetown and its future is governed by the people. Not one person, not one board, not one special interest. It all has to be hashed out and agreed to by the majority will of town meeting. So I talk about economic development. That's, part of my job. I'm not out to change the complexion, increase the density, and increase the building heights and anything like that. I'm just doing my job working with people, and this is the interest that I'm faced with. The pressure of creating economic development. When in fact, it may be the majority will, the silent majority that we all know who came up with that term many years ago. Silent majority can be very much different than those vocal activists that want something that, guess what, not everybody else, not the majority wants. So you go to town meeting and, we put all this work into, this development proposal, and it gets shut down. But that's the will of the people speaking, I just came across another quote last night. Somebody said on the radio, and it was Mark Twain. And I know I'll do a terrible job of paraphrasing, but everybody wants progress, but nobody likes change.
It's true.
Everybody's in favor of progress, but no, I don't like the change.
Continue to talk about voting against or voting for at the town meetings. Is there a quorum? Do you have to have a certain amount of
Yeah.
voters there?
Oh, yeah. You can't start the meeting unless there's a quorum of at least 100 people.
Quorum is 100?
Yeah,
Is that what it is?
yeah,
Some want to change that. So be careful not to let it happen.
yeah. Because the two that I've participated in since being employed in Georgetown, last spring and this fall, both meetings, people have had to call up friends and relatives to show up to get to that 100. Nobody wants to participate anymore. That means leaving the house, that means interrupting my schedule, you know, nobody has any time anymore. But the most important thing you can do as an inhabitant, a resident of any town that you live in, and especially a town like Georgetown, is to participate. It's your duty and responsibility as a resident. The town cannot function without volunteers working for the town, without selectmen willing to be elected, planning board members. And, you know, that's another thing. I mean, I should be on the recruiting team. You know, we need more volunteers. We need people willing to step up, and preferably people with experience too. But then, you know, everybody is welcome to get involved. And I know everybody that lives in town wants to make sure they're creating the best future for the town, you know, as they see fit. But, you know, it takes a village to make a town. And make it work right, it takes more of those villagers to be participants.
John, why don't you, would you recount your participation in getting the Complete Streets project finalized and accepted by the state?
Now, you gotta say that, you know, I planted him in the audience to ask that question too, but when I first came, and it must have been the first week, Doug came to me and said, hey, you know, that's a Complete Street program in Massachusetts, and we almost made it as a Complete Streets program community, but that ball was dropped previously, and I want that as a priority. So Doug, having a conversation with him, I got on the ball with, or on the horn with Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. I said, hey, can you help us get into this Complete Streets program? What do we need to do? And this was boom, 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 working with staff at Merrimack Valley, working with Pete Durkee. That was in February. And you have to fill out all the paperwork. It has to be in on time. You have to meet the deadlines. Luckily, everything's electronic, so it's not you know, running to the mailman or anything like that. So from the initial discussion with Doug, working all through the summer on Georgetown becoming a Complete Streets community, we were able to achieve that. And what that means in a nutshell is that every community in the Commonwealth eventually will have to become a Complete Streets program community in order to receive state and federal funding for maintaining and improving their roadways. And we're in the top tier, even though this program's been in place and you can be eligible to join as a Complete Streets program community with the state in this program for the last 3 years. It could have even been longer. A lot of cities and towns don't stay up on this stuff. And you know, Woburn, my hometown, they're still just talking about it. But over this year, we actually became a Complete Streets program community along with several of our peers in the Merrimack Valley. And throughout the state, I think it's at 20-25% of the communities. Only 20-25% of the communities are participating communities in this program. And what we already have, if I could just hold on 1 second, because I'll lose this train of thought. Through Pete Durkee's efforts, working with him over the summer, I had an engineer interested in doing the work to put the whole program together, and Pete was also doing it through another engineering firm. And when he got back from vacation, he said, hey, we already got it done. And this engineering firm, the head of the engineering firm, works in Georgetown, and they're gonna put the whole program together for us. And part of it is, you have to put 15 projects together. You have to prove that the town needs 15 road improvement projects. And then you pull out of that 15, the priority project. And the engineering firm put that together. And what is going to result is that Central Street, from Nelson all the way up to Library Street, is going to be completely revitalized with sidewalks, curbing, proper drainage, and a new surface. And we probably, I say probably, will receive that funding for this construction here. And it's $400,000 that would not have been received otherwise.
Right, that's
But-
on top of the chapter 90.
Yeah, but forever now, we're part of that program, and that program is going to provide the funding for road improvements for all Commonwealth communities in the future. You have to be certified Complete Streets program. And what Complete Streets means is that all modes of travel, whether it be pedestrian, bicycle, cars, motorcycles, whatever people, using that right of way, to be able to use that right of way.
Excuse me, I have to get him out of here.
Okay. So that's what Complete Streets means, to make the streets user-friendly for all participants of those roadways. Yeah. Yeah.
Where does West Main Street fit in this?
West Main Street eventually,
I've been hearing this about move that to town, this event. When's it happening?
well,
You got your patch on the left.
Groveland, did what they did this year. Eventually, and I'm envisioning this now, but eventually that'll be improved all the way up to 95.
Watch the dude, the only spot in the middle.
Yeah. I'm not going to promise it anyone's lifetime, but it will be done. All right. It will be done. Real quickly, so we get out of the planning board meeting, I get into a conversation with a couple of board members afterwards. I don't leave the parking lot till 10:30, right? I'm driving down the road, going home, boom, 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 flat tire. I haven't changed a flat tire, I think, since I was in high school.